In April 2016, inside a Missouri Department of Transportation lost and found storage facility, a beige canvas suitcase was taken down from a metal shelf where it had remained untouched for nearly 8 years. It carried no forwarding address, no follow-up inquiry, no trace of anyone coming back for it. A faded intake tag tied to the handle dated it to November 30, 2008. The location listed was Ozark Meadows Rest Area, Interstate 44. When the zipper was pulled open during routine inventory cleanup, what lay inside did not resemble the random clutter of a forgotten traveler. A pale pink leather wallet rested neatly against the lining. An Illinois driver's license identified the owner as Marisella Quade, age 28 at the time it was issued. A single photograph showed a young couple standing close together, a toddler between them. Tucked beneath the photo was a white envelope. On the front, written in careful blue ink, were the words, "To the person who finds this suitcase." Inside were 3 folded letters. The final line of the third letter read, "I cannot make it back home on my own. Please help me." The name on the license matched an unsolved missing person case from late 2008. Marisella Quade had disappeared during the final night of Thanksgiving weekend that year. She had been 28 years old, living in suburban Illinois with her husband, Harlan Vey, and their 2-year-old son, Kellen. The official report listed the last known sighting as Ozark Meadows Rest Area in southern Missouri, off Interstate 44, around 8 p.m. on November 30, 2008. According to Harlan Vey's statement filed months earlier, the couple had been driving back to Illinois after spending the holiday with his parents in rural Missouri. Their son had stayed behind with grandparents for an extra few days. The drive north had been uneventful until the stop at Ozark Meadows. Marisella had said she needed to use the restroom. She did not return to the car. Harlan reported that he waited. He later stated he assumed she would contact him, take a taxi, or make her own way home if she needed time alone. He did not file a missing person report. For days passed before Marisella's mother, living in Illinois, went to local police after repeated calls to her daughter went unanswered. She had been told by her son-in-law that Marisella needed space. Something about that explanation unsettled her. The official missing person report was filed on December 4, 2008, 4 days after the disappearance. At the time, the case did not immediately suggest foul play. Investigators initially treated it as a possible voluntary departure following domestic strain. In 2008, law enforcement departments across the Midwest routinely encountered similar situations: temporary separations, emotional departures after holidays, unresolved marital tension. Without clear evidence of violence or distress at the scene, the file remained categorized as a missing adult with no confirmed crime. But the suitcase told a different story. The contents were too deliberate to ignore. Identification left behind. Wallet intact. Personal photograph preserved. Letters carefully written in advance. The final sentence, pleading, restrained, unmistakably urgent, suggested a woman anticipating a moment she could not fully control. The intake log from Ozark Meadows Rest Area recorded the suitcase being turned in at 10:12 p.m. on November 30, 2008. It was not found abandoned randomly. It had been handed directly to the front desk attendant of the rest area's administrative office. The person who delivered it had signed only as female, no name provided. That timestamp created a narrow window. If Marisella disappeared shortly after 8 p.m., and the suitcase was logged at 10:12 p.m., someone had been in possession of it during those 2 hours. It was not left behind by accident. It was transferred. Investigators in 2008 had documented this detail but lacked follow-up leads. The rest area did not retain surveillance footage beyond a short retention cycle. By the time police canvassed the location days later, no video remained from Thanksgiving weekend. Witnesses were transient holiday travelers, untraceable after departure. Without a body, without signs of struggle, without immediate evidence of crime, the case gradually stalled. For 8 years, the file sat archived in regional databases. Marisella Quade's name remained listed in missing persons registries across Illinois and Missouri. Her son grew from toddler to elementary school student. Her husband remained in Illinois, maintaining that he had believed she left by choice. In April 2016, the rediscovered suitcase forced the file open again. The letters were sent to handwriting analysts and matched to Marisella's known writing samples from prior employment records. The message inside was genuine. It had been written before her disappearance, not after. The language suggested foresight, not panic. There was no accusation in the text, no dramatic farewell. Only restraint, uncertainty, and a quiet admission of inability to return alone. The discovery reframed everything. Marisella had not simply vanished at a rest stop. She had prepared for departure. She had left identification behind intentionally, and she had anticipated that someone eventually would find what she left. The beige suitcase had waited 8 years in silence. In 2016, it began speaking. November 30th, 2008 had been the final night of Thanksgiving weekend, a time when highways across the Midwest filled with families returning home. Marisella Quade and her husband, Harlan Vay, had left his parents' house in southern Missouri earlier that afternoon, heading north toward Illinois. Their 2-year-old son, Kellen, remained with his grandparents for a few extra days. The arrangement had been presented as practical. It also meant the drive back would be just the two of them. At approximately 8 p.m., their vehicle exited Interstate 44 and pulled into Ozark Meadows Rest Area. In his original statement, Harlan described the stop as routine. He reported that Marisella said she needed to use the restroom. He remained in the parking lot. He claimed he waited for her return. When she did not come back within what he described as a reasonable period of time, he searched briefly in the immediate area. He stated he could not find her. The timeline he offered contained no precise minutes. There was no receipt, no transaction record, no witness able to confirm how long the vehicle remained parked. What existed was his assertion that he eventually left the rest area alone. He did not contact local authorities that night. He did not notify Missouri State Highway Patrol. He did not call his wife's family. He did not file a missing person report the following morning. Instead, he drove back to Illinois without her. When questioned later about this decision, Harlan explained that the marriage had been strained. He stated that Marisella had been distant during the holiday visit. He suggested that she might have chosen to leave on her own. He described her mood as withdrawn. He told investigators that he believed she would reach out when she was ready. He framed his departure not as abandonment, but as acceptance of what he interpreted as her choice. The problem was the delay. Marisella's mother, Corinne Quade, contacted Illinois authorities on December 4, 2008, after several days without communication from her daughter. Corinne reported that her son-in-law had told her Marisella needed time alone. The explanation did not align with her understanding of her daughter's character. Marisella had never disappeared without warning before. She had never failed to check in about her child. Corinne's report triggered coordination between Illinois and Missouri law enforcement. By the time Missouri officers revisited Ozark Meadows, 4 days had passed. No surveillance footage from the relevant hours remained. No staff members could identify specific individuals from Thanksgiving night. The rest area had experienced heavy traffic during the holiday return surge. Witnesses had dispersed across multiple states. Investigators documented Harlan Vay's initial account. He repeated that he waited. He repeated that he believed she would find transportation north. He maintained that there had been tension in the relationship but denied any violence. There were no visible injuries reported in the days prior. There were no emergency calls from the residents. No financial withdrawals suggested preparation for immediate travel. Yet something did not fit. Phone records revealed that during the days leading up to Thanksgiving, Harlan had placed several lengthy calls to a number registered in Arkansas. The subscriber was identified as Bryn Calder, a woman who had grown up in the same rural county as Harlan. The duration of the calls exceeded typical casual contact. When asked, Harlan characterized Bryn as an old friend from high school. He did not initially disclose the frequency of communication. Further examination of cell tower pings placed Harlan's vehicle in proximity to his parents' town again late on the night of November 30th, despite his claim that he drove directly toward Illinois after leaving the rest area. The deviation was not dramatic in distance, but it contradicted his simplified timeline. When confronted, he stated that he needed air and stopped briefly off the main highway. He did not provide a detailed explanation for the specific route change. Meanwhile, no confirmed sighting of Marisella inside the rest area restroom could be documented. No staff member recalled direct interaction with her. No cashier reported a purchase in her name. The last confirmed connection between Marisella and any official record that night remained the time-stamped intake of the beige suitcase at 10:12 p.m. The absence of a body, the absence of physical struggle, and the absence of immediate forensic evidence placed the case into a familiar American category. An adult missing under ambiguous circumstances. Public perception divided quickly. Some community members interpreted the situation as a woman leaving an unhappy marriage. Others viewed the husband's delay in reporting as suspicious. Online forums discussing missing persons cases began referencing the timeline gap. Family members insisted that Marisella would never leave her son without explanation. Through December 2008 and into early 2009, law enforcement conducted standard follow-up procedures. Hospitals in surrounding counties were contacted. Shelters were checked. Bus terminals were reviewed for ticket purchases under her name. Financial institutions confirmed no activity on her personal accounts. Her Social Security number generated no new employment records. Credit cards remained unused. Harlan Vey retained legal counsel but was not charged with any crime. There was no probable cause for arrest. No direct evidence tied him to violence. He agreed to interviews and maintained consistent language. She left. He believed she wanted distance. He expected her to call. Behind the procedural language of reports and affidavits, one fact lingered without resolution. A 28-year-old mother had vanished from a public rest area on one of the busiest travel nights of the year, and the only person who claimed to know what happened had chosen to drive away. The file grew thicker with documentation but not with answers. For months, investigators revisited Ozark Meadows in hopes that someone might remember a detail overlooked in the immediate aftermath. They reviewed gas station transactions nearby. They scanned for unidentified female remains reported in surrounding states. Nothing connected conclusively. By mid-2009, Marisella Quade's disappearance had shifted from active search to long-term unresolved case status. It was entered into national databases. Flyers circulated briefly. Media coverage diminished. The dominant narrative remained uncertain. Voluntary departure or concealed crime. 8 years later, the rediscovered suitcase forced a reconsideration of every assumption formed in those first chaotic days after Thanksgiving 2008. As investigators reopened the case in 2016 following the rediscovery of the suitcase, attention returned to the fragile structure of Marisella Quade's marriage in the months leading up to November 2008. Financial records showed recurring disputes over small transfers of money from the couple's joint account. Nothing substantial, amounts under $100 at a time, but regular enough to raise questions. According to statements later gathered from extended family members, Marisella had quietly sent modest support to her mother during a period of medical hardship. Harlan Vey had confronted her about it during Thanksgiving weekend. Relatives from his side acknowledged tension during the holiday visit. No one described physical confrontation. What they described was silence, withdrawal, and a dispute over loyalty and money. Harlan reportedly viewed the transfers as betrayal. Marisella reportedly did not respond publicly during those conversations. No formal police report documented the argument at the time, but the memory remained with those who had witnessed the holiday gathering. In the days prior to Thanksgiving, phone logs placed Harlan in repeated contact with Bryn Calder. Investigators in 2009 had confirmed that Bryn lived in Northwest Arkansas and worked in regional sales. She acknowledged knowing Harlan since adolescence. She initially denied any romantic involvement. However, co-workers of Harlan described noticeable changes in his behavior in the months before Marisella disappeared. They described distraction, private calls taken outside the office, and a pattern of texting during work hours. The narrative emerging from those records did not yet establish a crime. It established motive for marital fracture. During renewed interviews in 2016, investigators revisited a statement originally taken from a rest area employee in 2008 but never fully pursued. The employee, then in her mid-40s, had contacted authorities after seeing media coverage of Marisella's missing person flyer. She reported that around 8:30 p.m. on Thanksgiving Sunday, she observed a young woman matching Marisella's description walking toward the restroom corridor. According to her recollection, the woman was not alone. A man walked alongside her. The employee could not identify his face clearly but believed he appeared older than Harlan Vey. At the time, this detail had been considered inconclusive. Memory during high-traffic holiday evenings is unreliable. However, the rediscovered suitcase reframed that observation. If Marisella had not left alone, then someone else had intersected with her timeline before the suitcase was surrendered at 10:12 p.m. Additional anomalies surfaced in archived vehicle location data. Although GPS tracking in 2008 was not as precise as contemporary systems, limited cellular ping information suggested that Harlan's phone traveled southbound briefly after departing Ozark Meadows before redirecting north again. When questioned years later, Harlan maintained that he stopped briefly off the interstate due to a headache and then resumed driving. The explanation remained technically possible, though inconsistent with his earlier simplified timeline. Parallel to these inconsistencies, investigators began examining Marisella's personal communications in the months preceding her disappearance. Among her archived email contacts was correspondence with a former coworker from a Chicago garment manufacturing company where she had worked before marrying Harlan. The coworker's name was Illyra Dorn. Illyra was 13 years older than Marisella and had served as an informal mentor during their time at the factory. Records indicated sporadic but meaningful communication between them over several years. In summer 2008, their contact increased. Emails referenced stress, exhaustion, and the need for clarity. None explicitly accused Harlan of wrongdoing, but the tone shifted from casual updates to confessional undertones. In late November 2008, 2 days before Thanksgiving, Marisella mailed a handwritten letter to a childhood friend, Eloan Price. The letter resurfaced during the 2016 reinvestigation. Its content aligned with the message found in the suitcase. She anticipated making a decision after the holiday. She asked her friend not to panic if communication stopped temporarily. She described the act of leaving not as escape but as courage. This language complicated the case further. If Marisella had planned departure, then the events at Ozark Meadows might not have been spontaneous. They might have been coordinated. Investigators contacted Illyra Dorn in Chicago in 2016. Illyra did not avoid the call. She acknowledged that she and Marisella had reconnected months before Thanksgiving 2008. She admitted that Marisella had expressed distress about her marriage. She also confirmed that Marisella had confided suspicions of Harlan's involvement with another woman. When asked directly about Bryn Calder, Illyra did not appear surprised. She stated that Marisella had mentioned that name explicitly before the holiday trip. The most critical detail emerged when investigators confronted the timestamp on the suitcase intake record. 10:12 p.m., November 30th, 2008. Illyra admitted she had driven to Ozark Meadows that evening at Marisella's request. According to Illyra's statement, the plan had been simple. Marisella would meet her discreetly at the rest area, leave with her, and begin temporary relocation. But Marisella never appeared at the designated meeting spot. Illyra reported waiting beyond the agreed time. Eventually, she located the beige suitcase near the outer edge of the parking area. She recognized it immediately. She checked the contents, confirming Marisella's identification inside. She interpreted this as a deliberate signal. Rather than contacting law enforcement, Illyra turned the suitcase over to the rest area administrative desk anonymously. When asked why she did not report the situation immediately, Illyra stated that Marisella had requested privacy and time. She believed her friend might have reconsidered or chosen an alternate route. She did not want to escalate what she perceived as a controlled departure into a criminal investigation. Her decision, in retrospect, created the 8-year silence. The confirmation that Marisella had arranged to meet Illyra before disappearing shifted the investigation's center of gravity. It suggested premeditation, not abduction. Yet it also raised new questions. If Marisella planned to leave voluntarily, why was she seen with another unidentified man at 8:30 p.m.? Why did Harlan's movements show deviation? And why did the suitcase appear before a later witness claimed to see a woman matching her description near a rural highway? The puzzle no longer revolved solely around whether Harlan had harmed his wife. It revolved around the sequence of movements between 8 p.m. and midnight on November 30th, 2008. Somewhere within those hours, Marisella Quade changed direction. The discovery that Ilora Dorn had driven to Ozark Meadows on November 30th, 2008 reframed the investigation, but it did not answer the most destabilizing question. If Marisella had arranged to leave with Ilora, what interrupted that plan? Investigators revisited Marisella's extended social circle, tracing names from old employment records, archived phone logs, and handwritten address books recovered from her Illinois home. Her years at the Chicago garment factory had created a small but durable network of contacts. Most described her as disciplined, private, and intensely protective of her child. None described impulsivity. One former coworker, Eloan Price, had already submitted the pre-Thanksgiving letter. Another former coworker provided a detail that had been overlooked in 2008. Marisella had occasionally referenced an older mentor figure she called the only person who listens. That figure was Ilora Dorn. The consistency between those statements strengthened the idea that Marisella had sought structured help before leaving. When questioned again in 2016, Ilora clarified the timeline leading up to Thanksgiving weekend. In late summer 2008, Marisella began contacting her more frequently. By October, the conversations shifted from casual updates to discussions about financial arguments, isolation, and suspicion of infidelity. Marisella had not framed herself as endangered in the criminal sense. She had framed herself as trapped. In mid-November 2008, Marisella told Ilora she had confirmed Harlan's ongoing contact with Bryn Calder. She did not present physical proof during the reinvestigation, but Ilora recalled that Marisella had referenced phone logs and unexplained absences. The emotional tenor of those conversations changed from confusion to resolve. According to Ilora, Marisella stated that after Thanksgiving, she would no longer continue the marriage under the same conditions. 2 days before the holiday, Marisella mailed the letter to Eloan. Its language, measured, restrained, centered on courage, mirrored the letters found in the beige suitcase. The repetition of that theme indicated planning rather than emotional collapse. On Thanksgiving Sunday, November 30th, Marisella contacted Ilora from southern Missouri. The call occurred in the late afternoon. She confirmed that Harlan was unaware of her plan. She provided the name of the rest area and an estimated arrival time. Ilora began driving from Illinois toward Ozark Meadows immediately. The critical window remained between 8 p.m. and 10:12 p.m. According to Ilora's 2016 statement, she arrived near the rest area slightly after 9 p.m. She positioned herself discreetly, expecting Marisella to exit the main building area and approach her vehicle. She did not see her. She attempted to call Marisella's phone multiple times. There was no answer. At some point after 10 p.m., Ilora located the beige suitcase positioned near a row of parked vehicles. She recognized it by description from prior conversations. She checked inside to confirm identification. The presence of Marisella's driver's license and wallet signaled intent. It did not signal accident. Rather than contacting police, Ilora delivered the suitcase to the rest area administrative desk. She provided no name. She later stated that she believed Marisella had changed course deliberately and that involving law enforcement might complicate her friend's departure. That decision aligned with the intake record timestamp of 10:12 p.m. However, another witness statement from 2008 complicated the sequence further. A local farmer had reported seeing a young woman matching Marisella's general description standing near a rural highway approximately 20 minutes from Ozark Meadows shortly after 11 p.m. The woman had appeared alone. She had not carried visible luggage. If that sighting was accurate, it meant Marisella was alive and mobile after the suitcase had already been turned in. The order of events confirmed that she did not personally deliver the suitcase. Investigators cross-referenced the time intervals. If Marisella separated from Harlan around 8 p.m., and Illyra arrived around 9 p.m. Then the interaction window between Marisella and any third party narrowed significantly. The rest area employees' earlier recollection of a man walking beside Marisella around 8:30 p.m. regained relevance. When asked again about the identity of that man, the employee reiterated that she could not confirm facial features. She estimated him to appear older than Harlan. She recalled a cap and jacket but no distinguishing details. Memory decay after 8 years limited precision. Simultaneously, investigators examined Harlan Vey's movements during the same time frame. Phone records showed outgoing calls shortly after 9:30 p.m., though none connected for long duration. Harlan denied contacting Bryn Calder that evening. Bryn's phone records supported that denial. There was no call between them during the critical hours. The complexity of the case no longer centered on suspicion of homicide. It centered on intent, coordination, and interruption. Marisella had planned departure. She had arranged assistance. She had left identification behind intentionally. Yet she had not followed through on the original rendezvous with Illyra. During the reinvestigation, Illyra disclosed one additional detail that had not been documented in 2008. In their final phone call before Thanksgiving, Marisella had expressed fear that Harlan might attempt to follow her if he sensed withdrawal. She had described him as controlling in conversation but had not alleged violence. The fear was anticipatory rather than reactive. If Marisella believed she was being observed at the rest area, she may have deviated from the agreed plan to protect Illyra or herself. The suitcase might have been left as a decoy, a way to sever her traceable identity before continuing alone. The suitcase, therefore, was not merely abandoned property. It was a marker in a larger strategy. The reinvestigation now faced a different equation. Marisella intended to leave. She did not board Illyra's vehicle. She was seen later without luggage, and her belongings were deliberately surrendered to create distance from her legal identity. The question shifted from who harmed her to where she went after 11 p.m. on November 30, 2008. Every piece of evidence suggested she was not fleeing randomly. She was moving toward something unresolved. The timeline between 8 p.m. and midnight on November 30, 2008 became the center of the reinvestigation. The suitcase had been logged at 10:12 p.m. by an unidentified woman. A rural witness placed a young woman matching Marisella Quade's description near a state highway around 11 p.m. The sequence confirmed that Marisella had been separated from her belongings before she was last seen. The rural witness, a lifelong resident of Laclede County, had reported in 2008 that he noticed a woman standing near the shoulder of a secondary highway, roughly 20 minutes from Ozark Meadows rest area. At the time, he had not connected the sighting to a missing person report. When news coverage of Marisella's disappearance aired days later, he contacted authorities. His memory placed the sighting after 11 p.m. He described the woman as having long hair and wearing a light jacket inappropriate for late November weather. He recalled no visible suitcase. In 2016, investigators returned to that witness for clarification. He added one detail that had not been emphasized in the original file. A small cargo truck had been parked farther down the road at the time he drove past. He had assumed it belonged to someone with mechanical trouble or a roadside stop. He had not noted a license plate. The introduction of a cargo truck altered the direction of inquiry. Investigators began canvassing transportation records from late November 2008. The area surrounding Ozark Meadows served as a corridor for agricultural and supply transport. Independent drivers frequently passed through overnight routes connecting Arkansas, Missouri, and Illinois. After several weeks of outreach, a man named Selim Rusk contacted Missouri authorities. In 2008, he had been 46 years old and operating as an independent agricultural transport driver. In his 2016 statement, he acknowledged that on the night of November 30, 2008, he had been driving northbound when he noticed a woman near the highway. He reported that she appeared distressed but composed. He stated that she asked for a ride toward Springfield, Missouri. Selim Rusk had not come forward earlier because, at the time, he did not know her identity. He only connected the memory when the reopened investigation received renewed media attention following the rediscovery of the suitcase. According to his account, the woman entered his vehicle voluntarily, and requested to be dropped near a central commercial district in Springfield. She did not provide her full name. She did not present identification. She did not ask to be taken to a bus station or airport. She asked only to be left near a cluster of older storefronts and market blocks. Selim Rusk stated that the woman remained quiet throughout the drive. He did not report coercion or panic. He did not observe visible injuries. His recollection placed the drop-off shortly before midnight. The absence of luggage matched the assumption that Marisella had intentionally relinquished the suitcase earlier in the evening. Without identification, she could not easily register at hotels requiring ID verification. That detail would become significant. Investigators shifted focus to Springfield lodging records from late November and early December 2008. Major hotel chains required government-issued identification for check-in. However, smaller independent motels and aging boarding houses sometimes accepted cash without extensive documentation, particularly in 2008 before tightened compliance standards became widespread. A review of smaller establishments within a 5-mile radius of Selim Rusk's described drop-off point produced limited leads. Most owners no longer possessed records from that period. However, one elderly proprietor of a small, aging boarding house recalled hosting a young woman for approximately 1 week beginning in early December 2008. The guest had paid cash in advance. She did not provide formal identification and did not volunteer her last name. She avoided interaction and remained primarily inside the rented room. The proprietor remembered the woman because she had left a handwritten note behind when she departed abruptly. The note had been retained in a drawer among miscellaneous papers. When investigators retrieved the note in 2016, it contained 2 lines. "Thank you for helping me get this far. I have something I need to resolve myself." The language mirrored the tone of the letters found in the suitcase. It did not express fear. It expressed intention. The boarding house proprietor estimated that the guest left approximately 7 days after arrival. That departure would place the exit in early December 2008, aligning with the period when Corinne Quade filed the missing person report in Illinois. By that time, Marisella was no longer at the boarding house and had not used her legal identification. The reinvestigation now had confirmation of 3 critical movements: separation from Harlan at Ozark Meadows around 8 p.m., transfer of the suitcase at 10:12 p.m., and arrival in Springfield near midnight without identification. What remained unknown was the purpose of her stop in Springfield and her destination afterward. During renewed interviews, Ilora Dorn disclosed an additional component of their prior conversations. Marisella had expressed desire not only to leave the marriage but to confront Bryn Calder directly. She believed that closure required facing the person involved with her husband. Bryn Calder resided in Arkansas in 2008 but had professional connections that occasionally brought her into southern Missouri. Investigators revisited Bryn's movements during the week following Thanksgiving 2008. Archived employment records confirmed that Bryn had traveled to Springfield on business during early December that year. The convergence of timelines intensified the narrative. If Marisella had traveled to Springfield independently, relinquished her identification intentionally, and remained in low-profile lodging for approximately 1 week, the possibility emerged that she had arranged or sought out a meeting with Bryn Calder. Bryn had previously denied a romantic relationship with Harlan Vey in 2008 interviews. However, the renewed investigation, bolstered by digital record analysis unavailable in earlier years, revealed consistent communication patterns between Bryn and Harlan prior to Thanksgiving. The volume and frequency exceeded casual friendship. By early 2017, investigators had not established evidence of a crime. Instead, they had assembled a chain of deliberate decisions. Marisella had prepared letters in advance. She had coordinated with Ilora Dorn. She had separated from her belongings to sever traceability. She had accepted a ride toward Springfield. She had stayed temporarily under cash anonymity. She had left another note indicating unfinished business. The narrative was no longer one of disappearance into randomness. It was one of controlled withdrawal followed by a personal mission. The missing person case was shifting toward something else entirely. A woman who had vanished publicly but continued moving privately, guided by a plan not yet fully revealed. By early 2017, the investigation had established that Marisella Quade reached Springfield, Missouri late on November 30, 2008, without identification and without luggage. She remained there approximately 1 week under a cash arrangement at a small boarding house, then departed, leaving behind a note indicating unfinished business. The question that had defined the case for 8 years, what happened at Ozark Meadows, was now joined by another. What happened in Springfield during that week? Investigators returned to Bryn Calder. In 2008, Bryn had acknowledged knowing Harlan Vey since adolescence but denied any romantic involvement. At that time, there had been insufficient digital evidence to challenge her statement. By 2016, archived telecommunications data allowed reconstruction of call frequency patterns between Harlan and Bryn in the months leading up to Thanksgiving 2008. The volume of communication contradicted casual acquaintance. The duration of several calls exceeded 1 hour. The pattern intensified during October and November. When re-interviewed, Bryn initially repeated her earlier position. She characterized the communication as emotional support between old friends. She denied physical meetings during the Thanksgiving weekend. However, investigators confronted her with travel reimbursement records from her employer showing a business trip to Springfield, Missouri during the first week of December 2008. Bryn acknowledged the trip. When asked whether she had encountered Marisella Quade during that period, Bryn hesitated. The hesitation was recorded. Eventually, she confirmed that she had received an unexpected call from Marisella in early December 2008. The call had come from a number she did not recognize. Marisella requested a meeting in Springfield. According to Bryn's 2017 statement, the meeting took place at a neutral public location. There was no police report at the time. No restraining order was filed. Bryn stated that Marisella presented knowledge of the communication between Bryn and Harlan. She admitted that the emotional connection between herself and Harlan had developed beyond friendship prior to Thanksgiving. Bryn denied participating in any plan to harm Marisella. She described the meeting as confrontational but controlled. She reported that Marisella did not threaten violence, did not appear unstable, and did not request assistance. She stated that Marisella made it clear she would not return to her marriage under those circumstances. Investigators could not independently verify every detail of that meeting. There were no surveillance recordings retained from that week in Springfield. However, cell phone location data confirmed that Bryn's device and an unidentified prepaid device were in proximity for approximately 90 minutes during early December 2008. The prepaid device could not be definitively linked to Marisella, but its appearance coincided with her known presence in Springfield. The reconstruction suggested that Marisella had executed a deliberate plan: leave Ozark Meadows without identification, reach Springfield through private transport, confront the other woman involved in her marriage, and then disappear from traceable systems. The boarding house proprietor's timeline indicated departure roughly 7 days after arrival. The next phase of Marisella's movements remained unrecorded in official databases. No bus tickets were issued in her legal name. No airline reservations were purchased. No credit card transactions occurred. Illyra Dorn provided the missing bridge. In 2016, after learning that the suitcase had been rediscovered and that the case had been reopened, Illyra disclosed that she had received a call from Marisella approximately 2 weeks after Thanksgiving 2008. The call had originated from a payphone in western Missouri. Marisella had informed her that she was safe and that she had confronted the situation she needed to confront. She asked Illyra for assistance in locating employment outside Illinois and Missouri. Illyra had professional contacts in a small manufacturing network extending into southeastern Kansas. One such contact operated a mid-sized garment production facility in a rural Kansas town. The facility frequently hired women with sewing experience. Illyra connected Marisella to that employer indirectly, without sharing her full background. Employment records from early 2009 confirmed that a woman named Marisella Quade began part-time work at that Kansas facility in January 2009. The Social Security number listed matched her legal identity. However, because she had not been formally declared missing as a criminal matter and because she had not requested protective status, the employment record did not trigger cross-state alerts at the time. In 2009, Missing adult alerts did not automatically flag employment verification systems unless law enforcement had entered specific warrants. Marisella had not changed her name. She had changed her geography. The Kansas employer described her as reliable, quiet, and self-contained. She rented a small apartment under her legal name. She did not disclose marital status to co-workers beyond stating she had a child in Illinois. She did not initiate divorce proceedings immediately. For 8 years, she remained in that Kansas town. During those years, Harlan Vey did not file for divorce. He maintained that his wife had abandoned the marriage voluntarily. He continued to reside in Illinois with Kellen. Bryn Calder relocated out of Arkansas in 2011, and her communication with Harlan reportedly decreased after 2010. The legal framework surrounding missing adults in the United States complicated the case. An adult who leaves voluntarily without filing a formal complaint cannot be forcibly returned unless evidence of coercion or incapacity exists. In Marisella's case, the initial categorization as a possible voluntary departure prevented aggressive pursuit beyond standard protocols. By 2016, the rediscovery of the suitcase forced Missouri authorities to verify whether Marisella was deceased or living under an alias. The Kansas employment record answered that question. In late summer 2016, investigators traveled to Kansas to request a formal interview. The woman they met was older, quieter, and visibly changed by time. But her identification matched the Illinois driver's license found in the suitcase 8 years earlier. Marisella Quade had not been abducted. She had not been killed. She had exited her life methodically and remained silent while the world classified her as missing. The only question left was why she had chosen to remain absent for 8 years before stepping forward. In late summer 2016, after confirming employment records in Kansas matched Marisella Quade's legal identity, investigators requested a formal statement. She agreed. There was no arrest warrant. No criminal charge pending against her. She was not a suspect. She was a missing adult whose disappearance had generated nearly a decade of unanswered questions. Her written statement, provided voluntarily, clarified the sequence of decisions that began before Thanksgiving 2008 and culminated in her relocation. She confirmed that in October 2008 she discovered extensive communication between Harlan Vey and Bryn Calder. The pattern of calls and messages extended beyond friendship. She confronted Harlan privately in early November. He denied wrongdoing but did not sever contact with Bryn. Financial arguments intensified during that period, including disputes about small amounts of money Marisella sent to her mother. She described the Thanksgiving visit to Harlan's parents as emotionally isolating. She characterized herself as resolved rather than impulsive. 2 days before Thanksgiving, she mailed a letter to her childhood friend Eloan, preparing for potential absence. She contacted Ilora Dorn and arranged for assistance after the holiday weekend. On November 30th, 2008, during the drive back toward Illinois, she maintained the appearance of normalcy. At Ozark Meadows rest area, she informed Harlan she needed to use the restroom. She sensed that he suspected distance but did not believe he understood the full plan. She confirmed that she had pre-packed the beige suitcase with identification and letters earlier that day. Her intent was to leave it behind intentionally. The letters inside were written in advance. They were not suicide notes. They were proof of conscious decision-making. She acknowledged that Ilora was waiting nearby but explained that she altered her plan at the rest area. She believed Harlan followed her briefly inside the building area. She feared that if she approached Ilora directly, Harlan might identify the vehicle or escalate confrontation. She left the suitcase where Ilora could find it and moved toward the darker edge of the rest area property. She confirmed that she reached the rural highway alone and accepted a ride from a passing driver. She did not know his name at the time. She chose Springfield because it was close enough for Bryn Calder to reach and far enough from Ozark Meadows to avoid immediate recognition. She admitted that confronting Bryn was part of her decision to leave. She described the meeting as emotionally final. Bryn acknowledged the relationship with Harlan. Marisella stated that hearing the admission directly removed any remaining doubt about returning to her marriage. She explained that she did not report herself safe to authorities immediately because she feared being pressured to reconcile or return for custody negotiations before she had secured financial independence. She feared that Harlan might leverage their son against her during divorce proceedings if she returned abruptly without preparation. Her week in Springfield served as a transition. She evaluated options, contacted Illyra again, and accepted assistance relocating to Kansas. She began working in January 2009 under her legal name. She did not request a change of identity. She did not apply for protective status. She described her absence as strategic distance rather than disappearance. She acknowledged that she monitored limited public information about her own missing person case during the early years. She did not contact her mother directly, believing that law enforcement scrutiny might intensify if communication was traced. She described that decision as the most painful of her life. For 8 years, she built employment stability in Kansas. She did not remarry. She did not initiate divorce proceedings during that period. She stated that fear of custody litigation delayed formal legal action. She believed that as long as she remained classified as missing rather than formally divorced, Harlan would not aggressively pursue financial claims against her. The rediscovery of the suitcase in April 2016 altered her calculation. The letters she had written in 2008 resurfaced publicly through renewed media attention. She interpreted that as a signal that the past would not remain dormant indefinitely. She decided to step forward voluntarily rather than risk legal exposure through accidental discovery. Her statement included acknowledgement of responsibility. She recognized the emotional toll her absence imposed on her son. She stated that she believed remaining in the marriage would have exposed her child to sustained emotional conflict and manipulation. She described her departure not as abandonment of motherhood but as preparation for a healthier reentry. When asked why she left identification behind, she clarified that she wanted to prevent immediate tracking through credit systems and employment verification. She believed that if her identification remained traceable, she could be located before confronting Bryn or securing employment elsewhere. Leaving the suitcase at the rest area ensured that no official record would show her checking into lodging under her own name that night. She confirmed that she intentionally avoided filing for divorce until she was financially stable. In early 2016, before the suitcase resurfaced, she had begun preliminary consultation with a Kansas family law attorney about initiating proceedings across state lines. The timing of the reopened investigation accelerated that plan. Her written statement concluded with a line that mirrored the letters from 2008. "I was not running from danger. I was walking toward clarity." Investigators verified her identity through fingerprint comparison and Social Security records. No evidence suggested coercion during her absence. No criminal charges were pursued against her. Under U.S. law, an adult has the right to leave a marriage without notifying law enforcement, provided no crime accompanies the departure. The 8-year missing person case was officially reclassified from unresolved disappearance to voluntary absence in late 2016. The next phase would not unfold in criminal court but in family court. The reintegration into her son's life would require legal process, negotiation, and acknowledgement of the years that had passed. The mystery of Ozark Meadows was no longer a question of violence. It was a question of choice and of the cost of that choice. In September 2016, formal divorce proceedings were filed in Illinois. The paperwork cited irreconcilable differences and prolonged separation. Harlan Vey did not contest the filing. The documentation included acknowledgement of Marisella Quade's reappearance and her voluntary absence since November 2008. The court required clarification of financial matters and parental responsibilities, but the central dispute, the mystery of whether she was alive, had already been resolved. Bryn Calder's relationship with Harlan became part of the court record. Phone logs and sworn statements established that their involvement began before Thanksgiving 2008 and continued afterward. The court did not treat the affair as a criminal matter, but it influenced determinations of credibility and emotional climate within the marriage. Custody negotiations centered on Kellen, who had been 2 years old at the time of his mother's disappearance and 10 years old when she returned. For most of his conscious memory, his mother had existed only in photographs and fragmented explanations. Harlan had told him that she left. Corinne Quade had told him that she loved him. The truth, as reconstructed through legal affidavits and interviews, existed somewhere between absence and protection. The first formal meeting between Marisella and her son occurred under supervision as part of family court procedure. There was no dramatic confrontation. There was no public spectacle. There was a mother reintroduced into a child's life through scheduled visitation agreements and incremental rebuilding of trust. Kellen did not immediately ask for explanations in legal language. He asked why the return had taken so long. The answer could not fit inside a courtroom affidavit. Marisella did not offer a defense. She did not accuse. She did not attempt to rewrite the past as simple necessity. She acknowledged that leaving had consequences. The divorce finalized before the end of 2016. Shared custody arrangements were structured gradually, beginning with supervised visits and expanding over time. The court evaluated stability, housing, employment, and psychological readiness. Marisella's 8-year employment record in Kansas supported her case. No evidence suggested she had abandoned parental responsibility out of indifference. The court recognized that her absence, while voluntary, was not malicious in intent. Harlan Vey remained in Illinois. Bryn Calder relocated to another state shortly after the divorce proceedings concluded. There were no criminal charges filed against either party. The law had never established a crime, only a rupture. The beige suitcase remained in evidence until the case was formally closed. It had carried identification, letters, and the weight of assumption for 8 years. The Department of Transportation employee who rediscovered it later remarked that it had seemed like an ordinary forgotten item. It contained no jewelry, no valuables, no visible signs of trauma. It contained something more disruptive, intention. Marisella did not return to Illinois permanently. She maintained residence in Kansas but traveled regularly for custody exchanges. She did not seek public attention. She declined media interviews beyond a brief written statement confirming that she had left voluntarily and was safe. She described her departure as an act of survival within the confines of a marriage that had eroded her autonomy. In the years following her return, she rebuilt a relationship with her son slowly. Trust required repetition rather than explanation. Birthdays, school events, scheduled visits. Each became a quiet demonstration of consistency. She did not attempt to erase the 8-year gap. She worked within it. The case of November 30, 2008 did not conclude with handcuffs or headlines. It concluded with paperwork, mediation sessions, and the acknowledgement that adult disappearance does not always equate to violence. Sometimes it equates to fear of staying. The legal system categorized her absence as voluntary. The emotional record was more complex. Corinne Quade reconciled relief with lingering resentment. Harlan Vey reconciled betrayal with public scrutiny. Kellen reconciled memory with reality. Marisella reconciled survival with consequence. Years later, when asked privately by a social worker why she had left her identification behind, she offered a simple answer. Without identity papers, she could not easily be found before she was ready. It was not about disappearing forever. It was about creating space long enough to think clearly. The suitcase had waited 8 years in a storage facility because no one came to claim it. In truth, it had not been forgotten. It had been positioned deliberately, like a bookmark in a story paused mid-chapter. Her life after 2016 did not transform into perfection. It became ordinary. Work schedules, custody calendars, therapy sessions, and gradual normalization replaced speculation. The sensational question, what happened at the rest area, gave way to a quieter one. How does someone rebuild after choosing to leave everything familiar? Marisella's answer unfolded not in dramatic gestures but in sustained presence. She did not frame herself as a hero. She did not portray her departure as noble. She described it as necessary at that moment in time. The cost of that necessity remained visible in her son's cautious questions and in the silence that followed certain topics. In the American legal and cultural landscape, adults have the right to walk away. That right does not eliminate the ripple effects of the decision. Freedom and responsibility exist on the same ledger. The story that began at Ozark Meadows Rest Area in 2008 did not end with disappearance. It ended with return, delayed, complicated, imperfect, but deliberate. The beige suitcase no longer rests on a shelf. It exists now as documentation in a closed file, evidence of a choice that once looked like tragedy. The greater truth was less dramatic and more human. Sometimes leaving is not about running from harm, but about refusing to remain where dignity erodes. Marisella Quade did not vanish. She paused her visible life long enough to reclaim it on her own terms. The cost was 8 years. The outcome was clarity. And clarity, however late it arrives, is still a form of courage. Thank you sincerely for taking the time to listen to today's story. Your attention, your patience, and your willingness to reflect on complex human experiences mean more than you may realize. Stories like this are not just about events that happened in the past. They are about choices, consequences, courage, and the quiet strength it takes to begin again. If there is one lesson to take from this story, it is that life is rarely simple, and the decisions people make often carry layers of fear, hope, and survival beneath the surface. We are reminded that leaving is not always about running away, and staying is not always the strongest option. Compassion requires us to look beyond appearances and to understand that every person carries a private struggle the world may never fully see. We hope this story encouraged you to think a little deeper, to feel a little more empathy, and to recognize the importance of dignity, clarity, and resilience in difficult moments. If you would like to support our channel and help us continue sharing meaningful stories like this, please take a moment to press the like button, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to keep creating, researching, and bringing these human stories to light. Thank you again for being here with us today.